Okay, folks, we're going to get started. So, this training is on demystifying future planning. So, my name is Cortney. I am a licensed social worker and I'm the director of individual advocacy and program evaluation at the ARC Minnesota. And what all that means is I help people with this stuff all the time. We get people that call in, we have a help desk for quicker questions, and then do some more intensive advocacy to help people navigate all sorts of future planning type topics. So that is me. Visual description for the recording. I am a white woman with brown hair, and I am wearing a teal cardigan and a black dress. Who's in attendance today? I'm just wondering about if you're a professional, parent, just your kind of identity for today. Parent. All right. And you're professional in tech support. Very good. Okay, so I use the space however you need to. If you need to get up and walk around, you need to fidget, you want to write things down, draw, close your eyes, whatever you need to do today, feel free to do so. A little bit about the ARC, if you aren't familiar. We promote and protect the rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. You may hear me use the acronym IDD to stand for that, intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we want people to be fully included in their communities, able to participate, and really just be in a world that welcomes them. Not this world full of barriers that we currently live in. I'm thinking that echo is from that side of things, not from, okay. Our values for the organization are human and civil rights, self-advocacy and self-direction, equity and belonging, and disability and racial justice. So if you're wondering what we do or kind of just our general view on things, feel free to check those out when the slides are sent out. And then the last kind of thing I'll get into before the meat of the presentation is the principles of disability justice. Now, these were created by a group called Sins Invalid, and they are a group of adults who have disabilities who wanted to go beyond the disability rights movement, which has been happening for a while, into disability justice. So they created these 10 principles, and they've really shaped the work that we've done at the ARC, and honestly changed for the better, just being led by people with actual lived experience in this area. So if you haven't heard of them, those are linked as well for you to check out. Now, the meat. What is future planning? So for future planning, you're going to be asking yourself questions like, what will happen when I'm gone? What will the future look like? How can I set those things in motion? How can I prepare as much as possible? Who's going to be there? All of these questions and more are probably in your mind, and you're wanting to answer them, which is why you're at this presentation. So a few of the things that you can do to start answering those questions, they're never 100% answered. We never have, we can't tell the future. We don't know things for sure. But some of the things that you can do are helping your loved one build a network of supporters. And those could be people right now that are involved, people that might be involved later. Maybe they're involved a little bit now and planning for a lot later. Setting up supports to help your loved one make decisions. Again, this is something that can be short-term, long-term, builds on itself. Setting up a trust, which we'll get into the details of that. An ABLE account, writing your will, and applying for formal benefits. Now, there's all sorts of other elements too, but these are the ones that we're going to cover today and dive into. We're not going to go deep into anything because this is just an overview of all the things. And then if you want to talk more, there are some more presentations this afternoon that dive deeper into some of these areas. And you can always give me a call and we can chat about your specific situation. So the first thing is building a network. I like to say that nobody lives on an island completely alone. You think about, anybody that goes to college, 18, they're still probably calling mom, how do I do laundry? Like, how do I do these things, right? Nobody's completely alone. We all get help getting our car fixed or any of those things. The other thing to think about is your network may already be bigger than you think it is. You sometimes get caught in the idea that one person needs to do everything. And that's just impossible because parents are like superhuman and they wear all sorts of hats and they do all the things. They're mom and caregiver and advocate and legal support and all of these things. So when you're thinking about your network, don't necessarily think of one person to do everything that you're doing. Think about this whole big network of people that all could take on one part of it, maybe two parts of it, even if it's something small like meeting up every once in a while for coffee to build a social network, to something really large like managing a trust. The next thing we're going to dive into is decision-making supports. And this one, we're going to go a little bit deeper because there's so many different options out there. So we're going to touch on each of them. But that network that we just talked about is really going to shape all of this, all the things that we talk about. So as I'm going through some of these more detailed things about decision-making and trust and able accounts, think about in your network, someone that might be able to help with those things now or down the road. So just kind of have that in your mind. There are lots of different network building tools, lots of different conversations we can have around that. But for right now, for today's purposes, just kind of have in your mind as these things come up, if someone comes to mind, you can put them down. So for decision-making supports, the main kind of theme is that everyone makes choices. People often need help understanding, making, and communicating their choices, but everyone does make choices. There is no one-size-fits-all approach, though. So when we think about something like guardianship, which we'll get into, that's a legal way of someone else being able to make big decisions for you, but that isn't all your choices, right? It isn't, oh, what are you gonna eat and when are you gonna eat and all of those things. So there's this range of the really, really big decisions and the day-to-day decisions and everywhere in between. These are all the kinds of support that we're going to talk about today, all on one slide. And we're going to get into definitions and all of that later. But this is kind of that full range of, at the bottom, guardianship and conservatorship. Those are going to be the most intensive support, the most restrictive of someone's individual rights and giving those rights to somebody else to make those decisions. And then towards the top are the less restrictive, the maybe less intensive supports. Diving in, a circle of support is trusted supporters, and it's typically not just like a one-to-one, it's that whole network that I talked about. It's all the people that you trust that are going to help you think about decisions. It could be family, friends, professionals, teachers, doctors, anybody. And the idea is to help process with the person, help think about options, and help them make a decision. So when you do this circle of support, you're probably going to have some people that you're going to talk about for some things, like maybe you want to talk with your aunt about relationships because you don't want to have that conversation with mom and dad, but you want to talk about finances with mom and dad. And this kind of really ties into the other side of the slide of a supported decision-making agreement. This is an actual document. So your circle of support is really just the people around you, those people you trust. And then the supported decision-making agreement is getting that on paper. So you're going to write down who's going to do what. It's going to be a conversation. You're going to talk through so that everybody's agreeing. So if Aunt Sally doesn't actually want to be the person that talks to you about relationships, she doesn't have to, right? It's an agreement. You're formalizing it. This is something that it has been around for a while, but is now getting more formalized in Minnesota. There's some statutes that have been coming out for this, and there's all kinds of templates around, just depending on how intensive you're wanting it to be. but it is not legally binding at the moment. So it's something that you're signing, you're agreeing to. It's similar to like a contract you might sign with a teenager. You will clean your room, or you can't have the car keys, right? That sort of informal thing that isn't legal. That may change in the future, though. The next two types we're going to talk about are release of information and authorized representatives. So releases of information, you're probably very familiar with. They just give permission for members of your network to talk to each other, for a doctor to talk to a teacher, or whatever it is. An authorized representative, though, is something a little more specific. So it is a assigned person that can't just talk, but they can actually make decisions on your behalf. So an example of this is medical assistants. Like with the counties, you can have an authorized representative that if county can't get a hold of you, or maybe just, you might always have an authorized representative that you're giving authority to make those decisions on your behalf. And they're supposed to also support you in making decisions on your own too. I'm going to actually talk about rep payee first, even though it's on the right side of the slide. So a representative payee is something very, very specific to Social Security. So it has representative in the name, just like authorized representative, but they're two different things. So this is for when a person gets Social Security benefits and they're designating someone else to manage those funds. So they would be in charge of the bank account. They would be getting the actual money. They would be paying bills with that Social Security money. And they have to report annually to the Social Security Administration since they're having this formal role. A joint bank account can be a joint bank account with, Social Security money, but you can just do this anytime. It's not like disability specific. It's not tied to a particular program. It's just having your name on that bank account with someone else to help them figure out how to manage their money. So you can log in, you can, look at statements together. You can write checks, like all those things, doing it together. The next one is power of attorney. So this is a legal document. And these can be for financial, for medical, for property. There's different powers of attorney depending on how you write them. They are pretty adaptable, so you can make them how you want. Attorneys are really good resources for developing power of attorneys to make sure you have everything, all the ducks in a row, everything written as you want it. You don't technically need an attorney to write one, though. You can get like 2 witnesses or a notary. I can't remember which one it is currently, but you don't need an attorney. I do recommend one though, because they'll get all the things in there that you need. Typically when you're doing some estate planning, people will do a power of attorney and a will together. They'll have an attorney do both of those things. A healthcare directive is another thing you don't need an attorney for. You can get a notary or 2 witnesses for this one. And this is specific to healthcare decisions. So you can have a healthcare power of attorney, which is a little bit more, I would say, legally binding. Both of them are gonna help you out at the hospital. But a healthcare directive is more about communicating your choices. So you're going to go through and say, if XYZ happens, I want, this type of care, all those different things. It goes through all the what ifs. There's some really short versions of it where it's not as detailed, really long versions where it's more detailed. And then you also designate somebody to make those decisions on your behalf if something were to happen. So guardianship and conservatorship are both I would say the most restrictive. So guardianship is not financial stuff, and then conservatorship is financial. So they're the two kind of halves of the coin. So both of them do require a court process. You have to go to court. You have to have a judge approve this. You'll have an attorney. It'll be a whole court process. For guardianship, there are 7 different powers, and I want to make sure that I get them all. So I'm actually going to pull up my notes with the list. So you'll see behind the screen, you'll see my list here. But I want to make sure that I get all of those. So The 7 powers are determining a place of abode, or where the person lives. Care, comfort, and maintenance. This is like needs for shelter, nutrition, access to service. This would include academic and vocational services. Reasonable care for personal effects. That's clothing and furniture. Medical or other professional care. So if you have a guardianship, you don't need a healthcare directive or a power of attorney. I do still recommend a healthcare directive because that's where you can note all your preferences, but it's not needed. Approval or withholding of contracts, supervising authority, and accessing government benefits. So you could apply for a waiver, you could apply for Social Security, those sorts of things. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the slide so you can see that bigger. Guardianships can be limited by a couple different ways. So time is one. As of 2020, all new guardianships have a limit of X amount of years. And then after that time, the guardianship is going to expire. You have to go back to court and see if it still is needed or not. It can also be limited in power. So you could have all 7 guardianships. We call that a full guardianship. Or maybe you just have 2 or 3. Maybe you only have government benefits and healthcare and housing. The judge, depending on the level of need that a person has, will grant a set amount of powers. They may say, you don't need the healthcare power. You can get what you need through a power of attorney and a healthcare directive. I'm going to grant the other 6. I'm not going to grant healthcare. The person doesn't need that, but they do need support in these other areas. So you'll see those limits to guardianship. So if you're a professional watching this and you're ever like looking at guardianship documents and you're wondering what kind of authority a guardian has, you'll want to look at which powers are granted in that document. Guardians will do an annual well-being report as well. Comparing that to conservatorship. So guardianship does not include financial decisions. When you have a full guardianship, there's a little bit of a implication that, okay, I have, in theory, all these areas of someone's life, there's going to be money, interchanged because of those areas. So there's some level of gray area there, but technically speaking, guardians do not have any control over finances. If you were a guardian and a rep payee, you could control Social Security related funds. If you were a guardian and a power of attorney with that financial power, you could do that. So a little bit of a nuance there, but conservatorship is power over all those financial decisions. The reporting for this is much more intensive than for guardianship because there's money involved. So you've essentially got to report on everything that you do for that person. Any sort of receipt, any expense, it all gets reported back to the court. I just talked at you for a while. Does anybody have questions about any of those things? And we're a little slim today. So if anybody has questions about those, you want to talk specifically, feel free to contact me after. We can chat and do that later. So now I'm going to get into trusts. So trusts are an estate planning tool developed very specifically, and this is disability trusts. They're specifically for government benefits so that it won't impact those. So if you have an income, or not income, but if you have an asset limit because of a government benefit through Social Security, medical assistance, any of those, and you would be disqualified, any money in a trust is not going to count towards that asset limit. The intent of it is to cover expenses beyond what those government benefits will pay for. So MA, Social Security, they don't pay for everything, right? It's some basic living expenses, and then medical assistance can pay for supports and services, but there's only so many things that that you can qualify for through that. So it doesn't cover everything. It does need to be spent on qualified expenses. So you can't spend it on anything illegal, obviously, but you also can't spend it on somebody else. So it has to be for the person that the trust is made for. There are 2 main kinds of trusts, and this is very Minnesota specific. So in other states, the terms get interchanged. So the 2 are supplemental needs trust and special needs trust. In other states, you'll hear Those different terms used for each other, and so it's very confusing. So Minnesota specific, there's my caveat. A supplemental needs trust is a proactive planning tool. It's a third-party trust. That means that it is someone else's money being left to the person with a disability. So let's say I want to leave money to my niece, and I want to make sure it's all set up. So if she has any government benefits in the future, it's not going to count against that. I would set it up. It would be a supplemental needs trust for the benefit of insert my niece's name. And that's how it would read. And then in my will, anywhere, I would write that down. Instead of leaving money directly to my niece, I would leave it for supplemental needs trust for benefit of. And that's how it would be written. For any grandparent, any parent, anybody that wants to leave that person money, it would go to the trust instead of directly to them. Any money that's left in that account after my niece passes away would be given to whoever you want. It's, typical beneficiary process. Okay, if main person passes away, it's going to go here, here, here. The flip side of this is a special needs trust. This is reactive planning. They'll call this an oopsie trust or a first party trust. Like, oops, we forgot to set up that proactive planning tool. We didn't do that ahead of time. So now we have to react. So this is grandparent passed away, or maybe somebody got a Social Security payback or a settlement from an accident, any of those sorts of things. And it can trigger the asset limit going beyond what will allow that person to qualify for the benefits that they're on right now. So you'll have X number of J's to get that money somewhere where it won't count against your assets. So people will set up special needs trusts, and the time is of the essence. So you've got to get moving on it. It's not impossible. Like, people do this all the time. You can still keep your benefits. It's just there's that time frame, and depending on the person that passed away, if it was that person's main support, who would have helped them set that trust up, now that person's gone, it's somebody else in that network trying to figure it out. So I highly recommend, if you are planning for yourself, planning for a loved one who either currently accesses government benefits or may in the future, looking into that supplemental needs trust to get it set up ahead of time. For this trust, because the money was in that person's name at one point, it got left to them directly before it was in the special needs trust, there is a payback clause for Social Security. So that means after the person passes away, it's going to go, any money left in it is going to go back to the government for however much money they spent throughout their lives on those public benefits. So if there's money left over after that, then it would go to your designated beneficiaries. But first it would go to the government. So some people have a supplemental and a special needs trust. If they do, I recommend using that special needs trust first, since it has the payback clause. Able accounts are the third way of saving money without impacting those government benefits. So these funds, again, spent on qualified expenses, very similar criteria there for any of the trusts or an able account. You have to, spend it for that person, not on someone else. Has to be a qualified expense. For this one, though, the disability has to have occurred before age 26. So if you develop a disability later in life, you would not qualify for this. There is the payback clause in this, just like a special needs trust. And there is a limit to how much you can deposit in this account. So it's $17,000 per year. The other two accounts don't have limits. The trusts don't have limits, but this one does per year. It does increase if you have a job. So if you have like Social Security income and employment income, you can deposit more, it's increased, but there are maximums that you can put in the account. So this is more flexible. So you can have like a checking account option. You can do investments just like a trust, but it's meant to be more flexible and to be able to still not impact those government benefits. A few things to consider about those three things. Again, Minnesota specific. I knew I had that on a slide somewhere, so that's there. But you can have all three of these. So if you did some proactive planning, but you also got money left directly, and then you also have a job, you can do all three. Kind of order of operations for that, you would want to save the supplemental needs trust for last so that can grow over time and it doesn't have that payback clause, but you can have all three. You can set up a trust with an attorney or through a nonprofit pooled trust. In Minnesota, the only place you can do that right now is Lutheran Social Services, and they can do a special needs trust or a supplemental needs trust. It tends to be less expensive. There's less fees since it's through a nonprofit, and they're pooling the funds together to increase the investment opportunities. You have your own individual account, but it's pooled together, which is why they call it a pooled trust. Or setting it up through an attorney is just fine as well. They do it just, very specific through an attorney. You do not need an attorney to set up an ABLE account. You do, however, need to go through a very specific place. So in Minnesota, it's called Save with ABLE is the website. And you need to go through there. You can't just go to Wells Fargo or any old bank and set it up. They probably won't know what you're talking about. And if they do, they can't set it up. You can also do ABLE accounts through other states. You don't have to use Minnesota's. Sometimes there's different features, different investment opportunities in different ABLE accounts in other states. But again, you'll have to go directly through there. You can't go through bank. So after setting up a trust, after doing any of that legal or financial planning, highly recommend updating your will if you have one or making one if you haven't yet. They'll also do that, power of attorney at the same time typically. But really any changes to your future plans, make sure that will is updated. Just because there's so many interrelated things, and you do want an attorney with disability specific expertise looking at all these things. You don't just want your family attorney or Uncle Joe to look at it because they're an attorney, but they're a patent attorney and know nothing about disability, but they're trying to help you out so you don't have to pay attorney fees, and they set it up wrong because they don't know that specific kind of law. And then down the road, it's not how it needs to be. So I see that happen all the time. So find a disability specific attorney. There's a few of them that have been presenting at this conference. You can contact me. I've got all the lookup directories for where they are and, terms to search and all of that, but have an attorney look at your will, update it, look at your trust. Even if you get it set up through that nonprofit, you do the pooled trust and are using them versus an individual attorney, I would still have an attorney look at things. Questions? I am looking at the chat for the folks on Zoom, so feel free to put questions in the chat too.
Located in Rochester?
Yeah, we're all across the state. So I'm personally from the cities from Farmington. We do have staff in Rochester as well, though. I just couldn't make it today, so I drove down. But yeah, I pop all over the state. So. Okay, the last leg of this is benefit options. So I'm not going to go into all of them, but I'm going to go high level over some of the benefit options that are going to affect those things I just talked about. So if you're someone who is like, well, why would I set up a trust? I don't have Social Security. I don't have medical assistance. I don't have any of those things. We're going to talk about those. I know that Michelle, as she was talking with parents planning for the conference, talked with a lot of people who hadn't explored any of those benefit options yet. So that's what we're going to talk about. This is super high level though, so there's plenty more options than the ones that we're going to talk about. The main ones are Social Security, medical assistance, personal care assistance, and waivers. The first one is Social Security. So you will hear two different terms. You'll hear SSI or Supplemental Security Income, and you'll also hear Social Security Disability Insurance or SSDI. Both of them, you need a qualified disability. So that's the same. For SSI, you need to meet income and asset requirements, and you don't have to have a work history. So this is something where if you've never worked, you've had a disability your whole life, you can qualify for this one. If you have worked, you can qualify for SSDI. So you have to have worked a minimum amount of years. They call it work credits. You have to have a minimum amount of those, and then meet income requirements for that one. There's also other programs within Social Security. You'll hear of RSDI, retirement benefits. You'll also hear the acronym DAC, Disabled Adult Child. So if a parent has retirement benefits and the child has a qualified disability and is already getting Social Security on their own, they can get an increase. They call it DAC, Disabled Adult Child Benefit. If you are a person who has that and has any issues with it, let me know. It's kind of its own kind of beast. Medical assistance is the other one that you've heard me mention today. So this is Minnesota's Medicaid program. You will hear this referred to as medical assistance, MA, Medicaid, all the same thing. You can qualify based off of income, disability, or both. And first and foremost, it's healthcare. It pays for doctor visits, those sorts of things, but it also pays for additional services and supports like through a county, PCA. We're going to get into some of those specifics, but this is what you need for the next few things that I'm going to talk about. Many different ways of qualifying. You can get it if you're an employed person with a disability and you're making money. There's a higher asset limit and no upper income limit for that one. You can get it if you just have the low income. You can get it if your child has a disability and your income is too high. That's called medical assistance TEFRA. So lots of different ways that you can access this. Not everybody qualifies even given all those different ways, but there are a lot of different avenues. So personal care assistance, you have to have MA, but it can be income or disability based. You don't need to have like Social Security or the state medical review team certify your disability for personal care assistance. They call it a state plan service. So to qualify for this service, you'll need to have an assessment, and you'll need to qualify for one of the things on the screen: eating, dressing, bathing, grooming. All of them are on there. But you'll need to qualify for those things. And what will happen is you'll call the county, you'll say, I want an assessment for personal care assistance, and they will assess you and they'll come back with a certain amount of hours that you qualify for. It's usually in a daily rate. And then you would be assigned a case manager to help you figure that out. You would find a company to provide that personal care assistance for you. So this is something that is a lot more accessible because you don't need that certified disability. Waivers, you do need a certified disability. So you're going to need to go through Social Security. You're going to need to go through the state medical review team. You'll hear the term SMRTed for that. So you'll need to go through one of those two avenues, and still have MA. So you would apply for MA and then go through this extra layer. You'll also need an assessment. So when you call the county, sometimes they'll just do a PCA assessment. Sometimes they'll do a full min choices assessment. I prefer the full min choices, and most counties are doing that because it gets you a full range of all the things you might qualify for, not just PCA. But there are several different types of waivers. I'm not going to go into all of those. They're very similar, but you qualify for them based off of your level of need, based off the type of disability that you have, and there's different things that they can pay for depending on the waiver. But I am going to go into the difference between a traditional waiver and consumer-directed community supports. So CDCS is the term you'll hear for that. So a traditional waiver, a case manager is going to be approving all your services. They're submitting in service agreements. They're doing all of these things. Consumer-directed is you doing more of that. So you still have a case manager. They still, bottom line have to approve it, but you're writing your own plan. And essentially you're given a set amount of dollars, you're given a budget for the year, and you pick services. There's typically a support planner that'll help you do this, but you pick what you're going to do. You pick how much money you want to spend on each area, and you're given the flexibility and also the responsibility of more of it. So people will use CDCS if they want to do things that they can't do on a traditional waiver. So a lot of times we'll see parents wanting to be paid to support their kids. You can't typically do that on a traditional waiver. There were some ways to do it with COVID-19 and some things that were in place, but some of those are ending. So anyway, that's one of the reasons that you'll see people going the CDCS route. There's also just other equipment, just other things that with the limits of the traditional waiver and all the policies for that, you can't get them through traditional, you can through CDCS. The caveat to it though is that the budget's typically lower. So for a traditional waiver, you'll have usually a daily rate, and sometimes there's amendments or additional funds that you can get approved if you're showing need. For CDCS, it is more of a set budget. There are still ways to increase it, but people tend to get less funding through that self-directed option, unfortunately. Right. Questions about services? Anybody? Nothing in the chat. All right, I'm gonna move along. So that was the high level overview of all the things. So just gonna say a little bit about how to get in touch with us at the ARC. So we do have a help desk. So you will get either me or one of our other staff, and we can answer questions about any of the things that I talked about today. If you want to talk more intensively about any of those things, like really diving deep, you would probably get me or one of our other couple of, we call ourselves the individual advocacy team. And we'll have more one-on-one conversations, like a Zoom meeting, just more intensive than a one-off phone call. So there's the information for how to get in touch with us on the help desk. All the slides will be sent out. And here's that number, email us, all the things. This is our region. So you were asking earlier about where we work. Here's our 5 regions. So we have staff in each of those regions and can answer calls right from anywhere, but we have physical presence in these 5 areas. So lots of staff in Rochester. We have a physical office here. It's off of Vandal Road by 52. So that's our physical office here in Rochester. And then we have physical office in Southwest in Mankato, and then in St. Paul. In St. Cloud and Moorhead, we don't have a physical office, but do have staff there that are out and about all the time. There's tons of volunteer and intern opportunities with us. We've got interns at the office now. If anybody wants to come our way for an internship or volunteering, membership, same thing. We got lots of opportunities for that, different benefits, becoming a member. Unique thing about us, any donation of any amount makes you a member. So definitely more accessible for self-advocates. All right. There I am, done with my presentation. I usually leave quite a bit of time for questions, but with the lower attendance today, we'll have the recording a little bit shorter for everybody watching it later. Oh, any questions from the crowd or in Zoom, Michelle? Well, we will end things. Do feel free to reach out to me if you want to chat about anything. And